Right now, try to remember your mom's phone number. By heart, without any hints. Can't do it, right? And now picture a person who kept in his head a map of all the trails across a territory the size of half of Texas. The habits of 100 animals. Which plant stops bleeding and which one causes convulsions. The entire library fit completely inside his head. I spent a week digging through the works of anthropologists and neurobiologists, trying to understand how this is possible. And the answer floored me. Your brain and his are absolutely identical. I dug down to the reason that usually goes unnoticed, and I stumbled upon a technique from the Stone Age. Science rediscovered it recently and considers it the pinnacle of the art of memorization. Now I'll show you why your memory isn't broken. You're just pressing the wrong button, and at the end, a question that will make you look at your own head differently. Let's go. Let's start with something simple. For an ancient hunter, remembering an animal meant something completely different from what you think. Not a picture of a deer. He knew a specific animal, as a personality with a character and habits. Compare it. You remember your coworkers. You know who's always late, who boils over if you touch their mug. That's how the hunter knew the animals on his territory. Which deer is cautious and which one is brazen? Which boar walks one path to the watering hole like a man who's driven to work the same route for 8 years? Anthropologist Daniel Nadasti lived for years among the Kluane hunters in northern Canada. He described how the elders recognized individual animals from past encounters. They could tell where an animal would be grazing a week from now, and why it would choose that particular valley. Picture an elder nodding toward a slope. This moose will come here in 7 days. Did I quote, "He've known him since he was a calf." And he's not wrong. And now, how he figured it out. This is where Stone Age forensics begin. An imprint half a centimeter deeper than normal. The animal is close to a ton. The toe turned outward, wounded, limping on a leg. The dung is warm or dried at the edges. There's the time it passed by. From broken branches, the hunter reconstructed the herd's route. From a single indentation, the weight, speed, direction, and mood of the animal. A criminal's profile. No cameras, no database, all in his head in 15 seconds. Researchers of the Bushman call this one of the oldest forms of scientific thinking. The hunter built a hypothesis about the invisible animal from the evidence, tested it with the next find, and corrected it on the go, exactly like a scientist. Only the laboratory is the entire step, and the price of an error is hunger. Don't make mistakes. And it wasn't enough to know every animal by sight. The hunter also kept in his head the schedule of an entire animal kingdom, like we keep flight timetables, only hundreds of times more complex. He knew in which month the deer rut takes place, when the males lose their caution, when the bison set off on migration, and in which week the herd would pass through a familiar mountain pass, when a bear's most dangerous period is, and when it's best not to bother it at all. Picture a person who remembers the schedule of 100 flights by heart, without a board, without an app, without a notification on his phone, where every route is a living herd that can change course because of a drought, or simply because the wolf pack leader is nervous today. Missed by a couple of days, the herd passed without you, and winter doesn't cancel because you were late. That's the volume he carried in his head constantly. Not new in theory, but used every day, like we use a smartphone on our wrist. And the animal's habits were only one layer. The same person kept in his memory dozens of water sources across thousands of square kilometers. And not just where the water is, but which wells dry up first in a drought, and which ones hold out until the very end. Migration corridors that the herds follow year after year. The ability to read the sky, like a weather forecast 3 days ahead. Think that's the limit? Not even close. He knew not only where the animal was, but how the animal's head was wired. He knew that a wounded deer would run down the slope, not up. that wolves would drive the herd toward a cliff or a river, that a frightened boar doesn't run away but comes straight at you. He thought for the animal, calculating its next move before it happened, like a chess player who sees the game 3 moves ahead. Only his board was the living step, and the pieces could kill. And all of this was multiplied by every species. A deer doesn't think like a boar. A boar doesn't think like a bear. A bear doesn't think like a wolf pack. Dozens of characters, dozens of behavior models, all stored in one head, ready to switch on at the needed second. Memory here wasn't a helper. It was the only hard drive on the planet. No other storage media simply existed, and it was trained to a level that today seems almost supernatural to us. But the most astonishing thing isn't the volume. It's how he held all of this without a single written record. He used a technique that science only arrived at very recently. The very one that explains why you crumble at a 5-character password. I'll come back to it in a minute. First, let's close one obvious question. Why did this knowledge stay in his head for a lifetime, while a phone number evaporates in 15 seconds? It seems obvious. The logic is simple. The hunter had emotional involvement. His life depended on memory. Hunger spurred him on. And that's the whole secret. We can all go home now. And that's true, but it's only half the truth. Look at how the brain works. It doesn't care about facts. What it does care about is what can kill you or feed you. The amygdala is responsible for that, a tiny region of the brain that works like a fire alarm. The alarm went off. The event is important. We record it permanently. It didn't go off. Junk. We erase it. That's why you still remember in detail how you nearly got hit by a car at 7. But you don't remember what you had for lunch last Tuesday. For the hunter, every piece of knowledge was wrapped in fear, the thrill of the chase, the relief of being fed. The alarm was screaming constantly. And everything was branded in permanently. His memory wasn't more powerful than yours. It was simply fed the right food. You'd think, there's the whole answer. Emotions decide everything. But no, emotions are only half of it. The real reason turned out to be far stranger. And I didn't believe it myself when I dug down to it. First, let's destroy a misconception. We like to think the hunter had a special, innate memory, and that over thousands of years of well-fed life, we lost it. But neuroscience says the opposite. The human brain has barely changed over the last 40 to 50,000 years. The hippocampus, the department of memory and spatial orientation, is exactly the same in you today as it was in the one who tracked the herds during the Ice Age. All the equipment is in place, right now, in your head, and it's sitting idle. The only difference is in how it was used. And here's the real twist. Ancient man tied every piece of knowledge to a specific place, where the animals gather, to a bend in the river, a medicinal plant, to a hill, the history of the ancestors, to an oddly shaped rock. The landscape itself became a library, and every step across his native land was the turning of a page. Now for a second, put yourself in his place. You read the tracks, you said where the herd would go. This isn't a test at school where you can retake it. This is reality. And you got it wrong. The herd went the other way. The whole day wasted. And in the evening, hungry children silently stare at you. These are the conditions under which that memory worked. Every day, an exam where the price of a mistake isn't a grade, but someone's life. Honestly, I'm not sure I'd pass even one such exam. And now, the promise technique. The very one for which I started this whole breakdown. Hold on, because it turns out to be more astonishing than you could have expected. In modern memory science, there's a technique. It's called the method of loci. The idea is simple. You mentally arrange what you need to remember along an imaginary route through a familiar place. Then, you mentally walk that path and collect the information back. This is precisely the technique used by all the world's memory champions, and it's believed to have been invented in antiquity by the ancient Greeks. And then the Australian researcher Lynn Kelly dug deeper and found something that made my hair stand on end. The indigenous peoples of Australia, whose oral traditions stretch back tens of thousands of years of unbroken transmission, used essentially the very same technique. Long before any antiquity, tens of thousands of years earlier, they tied vast bodies of knowledge, ecology, navigation, the laws of society, to features of the landscape, to so-called song lines. These are routes that were simultaneously three things: a physical path across the land, a sung map, and a pository of everything you need to know to survive. So the method of loci wasn't invented in ancient Greece, it was simply rediscovered there. And the one who actually invented it was Stone Age Man. And here's what follows from this. The human brain, by its very design, is first and foremost a machine for memorizing places and paths. The hunter performed no feat of memory. He simply used his organ exactly as it had been shaped by evolution over millions of years of life in a moving, dangerous world full of tracks and trails. He didn't memorize 100 animals as a list. This is actually the key point. If he had tried to cram them the way we cram a foreign language vocabulary, deer, cautious, rut in October, trail by the river, he wouldn't have held even 10. A list of 100 animals with their habits is a load under which our brain breaks down, just as it does on 10 passwords in a row. But he did it differently. He settled the animals across the living map of his land. That deer wasn't a line in a list. It was tied to the bend in the river where it was seen every autumn. That boar didn't live in memory as a fact, but by a specific marsh along a specific trail. The herd of bison wasn't item 49, but a moving line across a familiar pass. Every piece of knowledge was held onto by a place, a movement, a story. That's why 100 animals fit where a list of 10 passwords doesn't. He didn't memorize the animals. He lived among them on a map he carried in his head. And now look at what we do with this very same organ. We force it to cram a string of 8 random characters tied to no place, no movement, no meaning, not the slightest emotion. To a brain honed for the living world, such a password is pure nonsense, informational garbage. It genuinely doesn't understand why this should be kept, and it refuses. We go against its entire design, and then we're surprised that it lets us down. And there's a second side, even more troubling. Psychologists have described a phenomenon, digital amnesia. When you firmly know that information is accessible at any moment through your phone, the brain simply stops memorizing it. Instead of the fact itself, it remembers only where that fact lies. The well-known study by Betsy Sparrow, published in the journal Science back in the early 2000s, showed this directly. People retain information noticeably worse if they're sure it's been saved and can easily be found again. We've offloaded our own memory onto servers and into the cloud, and that very same apparatus that once held within it the map of an entire world now specializes in one thing: remembering which folder a file is in. So the next time you curse yourself over a forgotten password, don't rush to conclude that your memory is weaker than your ancestors. It's exactly the same, vast, capable of holding entire living worlds. You've simply been unlearning how to use it because you've entrusted everything to a device in your pocket. The hunter held 100 animals in his head, not because he was more gifted than you, but because every piece of knowledge was woven into his life and loaded with meaning on which it depended, whether he'd live to see the spring. And here's the most sobering part. For that man, wherever he went, the world was familiar and readable. We, on the other hand, have surrounded ourselves with information that means nothing and handed it to machines to keep. And now, deprived of our phones, many of us turn out to be strangers in our own cities, unable to recall by heart even the numbers of the people we love. The question, after all, isn't why we can't remember 5 passwords. The question is, does anything remain in us that we truly know by heart.